Hey, so good afternoon everybody. I hope you're all doing well at home, probably missing school very much. We'll just continue from our last exercise. So if you remember in the student's book, the homework I gave you was exercise 3 and the word power. So I'll go through the answers now and we'll see if you had any issues with the homework. So, number 1 in exercise 3, the Daily Courant was the first newspaper to appear every day in English. Number 2, the Times is an example of a newspaper which has appeared every day for a long time. Number 3, the problem for newspapers is that people A, want to read the news in a different way. And number 4, what does the writer say might happen in the future? C, there will be no newspapers in the shops. If you've got any of those answers incorrect, have another read of the article, read it again a bit more closely and try to understand why these are the correct answers. Okay, and the next exercise was the word power. So, number 1, the media. Number 2, print. Number 3, inform. Number 4, readers. Number 5, copy. Number 6, journalists. Number 7, click. And number 8, editors. There's a lot of useful vocabulary here, especially if you think about the vocabulary you need to understand how to use the internet in English. So make sure you understand these words. And I'll pick 3 of the words and can you practice your pronunciation at home? So you can listen to me and repeat after me, please. So, the media. Inform. Journalists. I don't want to hear journalists. Make sure this is a hard J. Journalists. And editors. Editors. Not editors. Editors. Okay, so I hope you didn't have any problems with the homework. I think because all of the answers were in the article, they shouldn't have been too challenging. If you still don't understand something, next time we're in class together, we'll discuss it together. So if we'll move on in the student's book, we're coming to some grammar. Our grammar is about relative clauses in sentences. A clause is a part of a sentence. Before we can begin talking about relative clauses, it's useful if you understand the relative pronouns, the types of words we use to refer to people, things, places, or possession of things as part of a clause of a sentence. So, if we're talking about people in a sentence with a relative clause, we can use who or that. If we're talking about things, we can use which or that. If we're talking about places, we use where, and if we're talking about possession, we use whose. It's important that you realize the word whose is very different to whose. These are different words. This is about possession, whereas whose here means either who is or who has. Okay, so these are our relative pronouns, and we use these to form relative clauses in sentences. Why do we use relative clauses? We use relative clauses to give information about something in a sentence, to form one sentence where we're giving information about some part of that sentence. So let's look at these sentences here, and using our relative pronouns, can we form these 2 sentences into only one sentence? So the first sentence, the first example, we have 2 sentences. The people are worried. They work in the media. Can you think, how can we use our relative pronouns to turn these 2 sentences into one sentence? Well, since we're talking about the people, we know the relative pronoun we'll use is who. So, we can form a relative clause to turn this into only one sentence in the following way. The people Then our relative pronoun, who, work in the media, are worried. So you can see we've turned two sentences, short simple sentence, into one more interesting sentence, where our relative clause, who work in the media, has been used to form one more interesting sentence. The relative clause, who work in the media, gives us information about the people. So let's have a look at the second example. A teacher is coming to our last lesson. He is from Scotland. Very similar to the first example. How can we use a relative pronoun to turn these two sentences into one sentence? We're talking about a teacher. So which relative pronoun will we use? We'll use the relative pronoun who because we're talking about a person. So the same type of example. A teacher who comes from Scotland is coming to our last lesson. And usually when we introduce relative clauses in the middle of a sentence, we bracket them off with commas. The people, comma, who work in the media, comma, are worried. A teacher, comma, who comes from Scotland, comma, is coming to our last lesson. So you see, using a relative clause, we give information about the subject. In example 1, the people. In example 2, a teacher. And we turn two simple sentences into one more interesting sentence. Number 3, some pupils do better in exams. Often their parents read to them. So, how can we use a relative pronoun to introduce a relative clause to turn that into one sentence? Well, we begin again with pupils. Our subject. So, we turn some pupils into pupils because we have a defining relative clause. So, it doesn't matter the some part because we're going to be talking only about particular pupils using our relative pronoun. So, pupils who, people again, do better in exams were So, if we're assuming often their parents read to them when they were younger, we can turn these two simple sentences into one longer sentence. Pupils, comma, who do better in exams, comma, were often read to by their parents. So, using our relative clause here, who do better in exams, giving us information about pupils, were often read to by their parents. And number 4. As you can see in numbers 1, 2, and 3, our relative pronoun was who. Because we're talking about people. Let's look at example 4. I like to go to the cinema. It's the place where I have most fun. Will I be using the relative pronoun who to talk about the cinema? No, I won't. I'll be using the relative pronoun we use to talk about places, which is where. So, let's have a look. I like to go to the cinema. It's the place where I have most fun. So we can begin with the place, where, the place where I have most fun is the cinema. So we've taken our two simple sentences here, I like to go to the cinema, it is the place where I have most fun, and formed one simple sentence using relative clause. The place where I have most fun is the cinema. The place, comma, where I have most fun, comma, is the cinema. Okay, so those are some simple examples of how we can use relative clauses with our relative pronouns to form sentences where the clause can give us more information about the thing we're talking about. Let's have a look now in the pupil's book to discuss the form of grammar. So we can go to page 124 and the grammar explanation about relative clauses. Here we have relative clauses. Here are some examples from our article on page 122. People who work in the media are worried. The first daily newspaper which was printed in English was the Daily Courant. A newspaper could tell you about things that were happening far away. Newspapers whose editors understand the problem might survive. Soon, the only place where you can find your daily newspaper could be on your phone. So here in bold you can see each have a relative pronoun, who, which, that, whose, where, and the parts in bold are the relative clauses, which give us more information about the things in the sentences. So let's discuss how do we use relative pronouns. We use defining relative clauses to show which particular thing we are talking about. People who work in the media are worried. People. Which people are we talking about? The ones who work in the media. Here are the people, here's who they are, who work in the media. Okay, so that's the end of today's explanation. Your homework for today's lessons will be exercises 1, 2, and 3. You don't need to do exercise 4 yet. We'll do that when you come back to class. Exercise 1, match to make sentences. When you're doing this exercise, think about how we use our relative pronouns. Are we talking about people, places, things, or possession? Exercise 2, tick the sentences where the word in bold is correct. If it's wrong, write the correct word. You're still thinking about the same idea. And exercise 3, write one word in each gap to complete the text. Okay, so that's today's homework and the end of today's lesson. When you finish the tasks on page 124, you can have a look at the next lesson where we'll discuss the answers and talk a bit more about relative clauses. Okay, enjoy your homework, good luck, and I'll see you in the next lesson.